Can diet and exercise reverse your biological age? That's coming up on this episode of the Longevity Podcast. David Lamb here with Dr. Steven Austad. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, now, we are in Birmingham, Alabama. The temperature outside is like 75. We've talked about what you do like on vacations, how your vacations do differ than mine as you travel through swamps. Is spring is spring your time of the year?
Oh, I love it. Everything's coming back to life. I love it. I'm going to Alaska in a couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see how spring is going up there.
I bet they're a little behind us. I bet.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Now, what is the Alaska trip? Is this work related or?
Yeah, this is an aging meeting. Although I'm going to stay a few days extra because I wouldn't go to Alaska and not spend some time to kick around in the bush.
Right.
So we're going to go looking for grizzly bears once the conference is over.
How about that?
And one of the interesting things about Alaska is it's so huge that you really can't drive anywhere meaningful. So you take a lot of bush planes.
Right, yeah.
So we'll probably be taking bush planes over, Denali and other places where there's supposed to be lots of bears. I understand that the bears are coming out of hibernation now.
Yeah. Now, you and I, since we're doing this podcast, and even before, whenever I would try to book you for my day job on the news, you do seem to travel a good bit. So you have a pretty cool trip coming up.
Yeah, I'm going to Sicily in a few weeks with Dan Buettner, who's the person that wrote the book The Blue Zones, and has turned that book into a big empire that's basically designed to make people healthy longer. And what he says is that the way you change people's health is not by changing their behavior, because that's difficult, but you change the environment that they live in, and that will change their behavior, and that will improve their health.
Yeah, and the Blue Zone, the book did incredibly well. Also, I believe a documentary type, 4 or 5 episodes. I think it was on Netflix. Also did very well. Originally, were you a bit skeptical of the Blue Zones, or? I was very skeptical of the Blue Zones. And that's because a couple of places that he picked out were places I knew a little bit about. So one of the places was a place called the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. And when the Blue Zones came out, I had just been in the Nicoya Peninsula, and there was nothing there that really made me think these people are exceptionally long-lived. But in fact, they had been known for a long time that there were villages in the Nicoya Peninsula where people did seem to live into their 90s and their 100s at a higher rate than you would expect. And that's what a blue zone is. Right. It's not where people live to be 130. It's just where there are more 90 and 100-year-olds than you would expect. Yeah. I enjoyed the book. As a layman, I like looking for practical examples that may help me, and many of what he touched on. I love his writing style, very conversational, understandable. Like I said, to somebody like me, not a researcher, and I enjoyed it, and his documentary as well. And you all are going to be kicking around for a little while. Where are you going?
Sicily. There's a new blue zone that he's investigating that's somewhere in the interior of Sicily. So we're going to be checking that out, interviewing some of the centenarians from there. He's going to show me how they go about validating the age of the people that they talk to.
Right. Well, it's going to be fascinating. I can't wait to hear about it, because I think a lot of him. I like his work and have enjoyed it for years. So I can't wait to see that. All right. How about we dive into our episode on diet and exercise and its ability to reverse biological age. You ready to do this?
Sure.
All right. So that's what we're talking about. And a couple of articles. One of the things I love about having access to you is whenever I read something and say, okay, what do you make of this? And usually, I've been in the media for a long time. I know those headlines that grab and the way they're posted, but you dig a little deeper. So a couple of them. So one article was in Men's Fitness, and it deals with the Dr. Eric Verdon. And now you know Dr. Verdon?
I do. I know him quite well. He's the CEO of an place in California called the Buck Institute for Aging Research.
Okay. And are you involved with the Buck Institute?
Well, I've been there for a lot of conferences, so I'm very familiar with it. I know virtually all of the researchers there.
Yeah. So how, for someone not familiar with them, not super invested into longevity. Educate me on the Buck Institute.
Well, they have a number of the really finest researchers in the country that do this kind of work, looking for ways to try to make people stay healthy longer. And I think it's the only private institute of its kind, and it's supported by NIH grants.
Yeah.
In fact, if this new 15% overhead rule sticks, they will probably have to close up because they depend, and not entirely, because they also have private donations, but they depend a lot on NIH grants. They're on about 300 acres right in the middle of Marin County. So they're in one of the richest areas.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. My son is in grad school out in out there, so I know Marin County. And I ask you a little about his background because this is not just some quack, somebody who doesn't really know what they're talking about. This is a respected voice.
This is one of the top experts in the world on aging.
All right. So let's go into this article. So an overview. It says this is from Men's Fitness, and he's a 68-year-old physician, and he claims that his biological age is 53, attributing that to a Mediterranean-style diet. That's a diet that's rich in vegetables, fruits, nuts, fish, olive oil, as well as daily exercise. The Mediterranean diet reduces inflammation, supports cardiovascular health, and he says his biological age, measured via the epigenetic clocks that you hear a lot about, reflects cellular health and lifestyle changes. And Verdon's 15-year-old reversal claim, though, requires further validation, is what the article says. So your thoughts on this article and this claim?
Well, I think when you say you're reversing aging, you can define that in such a way that it might be true, but I don't think it's reversing aging in the way that most of us would think about it. For instance, let's imagine that you hadn't done anything. You'd been very sedentary all your life. You'd never been to the gym, and you got to be 65 years old. Right. And suddenly someone convinced you to start going to the gym. You became very dedicated, and you started lifting weights and all. Well, within a short time, you had to be able to lift more weights than you would have been able to lift 15 years earlier, because 15 years earlier you hadn't done any training. So you could say, oh, well, I've reversed my aging because I can lift weights more than I could 15 years ago. To me, that's not really the same thing. I would say you've improved your function, and that's good, but I wouldn't say you would reverse your aging because your muscles are still the same age. Your tendons are still the same age. The DNA inside your cells has still got just as much damage as it had before you started. So, and then if you did things that we know aren't easily trained, if you did things like that, then I think this might disappear. This claim might disappear. For instance, one of the things that we lose with age is we lose our fast muscle fibers. So that's why people's running slows down fairly early. And what that means is you have less power. So if let's say how far you could kick a football, that would decline because you're losing those things. So my thought is you wouldn't be able to kick a football the way you had 15 years earlier because that's a different kind of test. So these epigenetic clocks, important to note that the way that we don't have any clue what they're measuring. Okay. The way they're doing this is that we have millions and millions of these epigenetic markers in our genome. And what they do is they take a bunch of people of different ages and they look at all of those and they say, now, which ones of these tend to change as people get older? And then they narrow down. Maybe they pick 350 of them that seem to change really consistently when people get older. And then take another group of people of known age, and they do the same thing to them. And, of course, you end up with the same kind of line the older they get. But then they look at the people that are above the line or below the line. You say, these people above the line are actually older than biologically older because that's what these little epigenetic marks are telling us. Now, I think the big witness is that the big weakness in that is that we don't know what those mean. There's no obvious tie-in to aging that we can think about. Now, epigenetic clocks aren't the only kind of clocks that are being worked on out there. There are also proteomic clocks. And all those do is they look at the different proteins. You have this cocktail of proteins, of thousands of proteins in your blood. And they do the same thing. They look at all your proteins and how old you are, and they do that to 1,000 people. and they look for proteins that seem to change with aging. And those are the proteins. And now they do it to a different group of people. Say, what's your calendar age? Okay, you're 46, but this point looks like you're 42. Now, the difference is a lot of these proteins, we have some idea what they do in your body. So we might actually learn something about aging from them. We don't know really what these changes are. I mean, I've had my epigenetic age done.
Okay.
And quite often, there's a lot of variability in the results. It might change by a decade over the course of a day. You know, that's hard to say you're reversing your age if it can be changed by a decade over a day.
Right.
And a number of my friends have sent in their blood samples, taken this one blood sample and broken it up into little parts and sent each of a part to a different place and sent some of it to the same place twice, and they come back with ages that are all over.
So you question the reliability of the epigenetic clocks.
I do. And the other thing is there's a number of ways that people have constructed the clocks, and the results often differ depending on whose clock you're using. And usually what people do is they'll pick the clock that gives them the most flattering result.
Of course, why not? Yeah, there's quite the market for these epigenetic clocks. These tests, they're out there. They're kind of everywhere.
Yeah, and that's another thing that makes me suspicious of them. You know, how do you get people to use your epigenetic clocks? Well, they give you good news.
Yeah,
that's how you get. You know, when I had mine done, my age was 6 years less than my calendar age, and I thought, well, that's good, I guess, but I didn't put much stock in it.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine whose calendar age was 3 years less, or epigenetic age was 3 years less. Mm-hmm. It really bothered him that mine was 6 years less than 3 years less. Even though before that we'd been saying, we really don't know what to make out of these clocks yet. It's too early.
All right. So, Dr. Stamler, the plant-based active lifestyle, we were talking about the Blue Zone. It mirrors the Blue Zone practices. What do you think public health campaigns, what can they learn from those to make longevity strategies, markers, kind of by significant margins? What can we learn from his claims, but also, but even in a larger context, claims of the Blue Zones?
Yeah, well, what all those things point to is that lifestyle matters. Lifestyle is really important. What you eat, how physically active you are, what you put in your body besides food, but we know that. The key is, how do you get people to do it? You know, people that are really motivated to stay healthy don't have any problem staying healthy.
Right.
You know, the people go to these longevity clinics. Yeah, they're going to live a long time because they're focused on their longevity all the time, and they're taking very good care of themselves. Whether any of the stuff they do there, besides staying active and eating well and sleeping well and, avoiding extreme stress, has anything to do with it, we don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me. Right. I mean, these longevity clinics are interesting.
Yeah. All right. So another article I just want to get to. This is so we go from men's fitness to men's health, a very male-dominated show today. A 101-year-old nutrition professor shares 7 tips for a long life. Okay. Dr. Jeremiah Stamler, are you familiar with him?
No.
Okay. He's a 101-year-old nutritionist, and he shares his longevity tips, and they are: eat mostly plants, prioritize lean proteins, stay physically active, manage stress, maintain social connections, avoid smoking, and moderate alcohol. I think I've heard most of those from you before.
Yeah, there's no surprise there.
Right.
I mean, and I don't think there's any special message that it comes from somebody who's 101 is still healthy.
Right.
He did all that apparently, but he's also lucky. There's lots of other people that did all the same things that never made it to 101. Yeah. He's also cognitively intact, and so, he happens to have the right combination of genes and behavior that kept him alive that long. But if you asked 100-year-olds, what's your secret to longevity, you'll get all kinds of different answers. Yeah. Those all happen to be things that we know from lots and lots of other work are good for health.
Right. Yeah. It's always humorous to me doing the morning news like I do, and you'll someone who lived to be 105, and she a glass of scotch and has smoked for 40 years. Those outliers are out there, but you're right. I'm sure most folks do pretty much adhere to this. So how do cultural and socioeconomic factors influence adherence to diets like the Mediterranean, and what intervention could bridge the gaps, you think?
The gap between what?
The gap between those who are living a healthier lifestyle, I would say, and those who are not, and access. Really a part of this to me that's intriguing is the access. Like if you're in a food desert, and so often fast food is what's readily available in some of the most impoverished parts of our nation. So, what do those factors and what can be done to help kind of get everybody kind of level the playing field, if you will?
Well, I mean that's a key question. We know how to keep people healthy. What we don't know is how to get people to do what they need to do to stay healthy.
Right.
That's the problem. We know exactly how to keep people healthy. From the Blue Zone perspective, what you do is you change the environment to make it easier for them to do the things that we all know they should do. A lot of it, and I think, there is this huge effect of how wealthy you are and how well educated you are on your longevity and your health. Mm-hmm. And we don't really know what that's all about. But I think part of it has to do with the fact that people have more time to think about it.
Yeah.
They're not thinking all the time about how am I going to feed the kids, how am I, I don't have a car to get to work, that kind of stuff. But it's a very large effect. I mean, the difference between people in the lowest socioeconomic status and the highest in terms of their life expectancy is over 10 years, which is huge. There are zip codes here in Birmingham that differ by way more than 10 years in life expectancy.
Yeah.
And we'd all like it if that weren't the case. And that's one of the things that the Blue Zone projects are supposed to try to do.
All right. So the National Institute of Health highlights lifestyle interventions as key to slowing aging. Okay. What are the most effective ways to educate the public about adopting the habits earlier in life to maximize? As you've looked at longevity, have you seen what works in terms of getting folks earlier to adopt healthier lifestyles? And you speaking of Birmingham, there's something here, these community gardens, where a place here, Jones Valley Farm, and I'm sure you're familiar with them and the work they do. They educate even at a young age, how to grow your own vegetables, the importance, and that's that. They let kids get their hands dirty, and the impact of that educating them seems to have an impact on the decisions they make when it comes to their choices. You think, is that an effective strategy?
I don't know. We'll have to wait 30 or 40 years and see. I like it. I think it's a noble goal. They're trying to do something really well. What the long-term impact of it's going to be, I just think it's hard to tell. What we want people to do is care about their health.
Right.
They care about their health. We know enough now that they can find a way to be healthy. Mm-hmm. You always hear that eating healthy is too expensive, that only people
you do
hear
that all the time.
But in fact, that's not the case. But you need to know how to prepare the food and how to purchase the food that's cheaper, and it takes longer to prepare. Yeah. And so you can eat a really healthy diet for relatively little. Well, it used to be relatively little money. Yeah. I'm not so sure.
Right.
Now, if you know how to do it, and one of the things that's going on in Birmingham with this group called Live Health Smart Alabama is that they have mobile markets that they take to neighborhoods that have fresh produce, and they also have menus. They have recipes that were put together by some of the famous chefs in town here about how to eat healthily but eat inexpensively at the same time. So I think that's a great thing if we could expand that so that more and more people take care of it. I mean, and my guess is there's a lot of people that don't need it that are taking advantage of it because they already probably eat healthy.
Right, yeah. Something also that is interest to me is the epigenetic clocks and the almost faddish trends around longevity, and in these clinics that are just so expensive. I mean, some of these can up to $100,000, which is now we're talking about the opposite end of the spectrum. A very exclusive group. Are the findings in those? Is it beneficial to the general population? The tests that are done that cost so much money, and I mean, are those tests being kept up with and logged in ways that's beneficial to the broader community that can't afford to pay $100,000 to a clinic or some resort you go to?
Well, I know a few of the people that run these clinics, and I'm actually an advisor to one of these in New York.
Okay.
I won't name it. And it's one of the really expensive ones. Most of the people that go there are celebrities, so they can pay $150,000 a year. I have to tell you that particular one is trying to figure out ways that they can democratize it.
Yeah.
And what I told them to do is a lot of the people that go there are CEOs of big famous companies. I said, if you want to see what works with, do this to the employees in your company and try 3 different things and see which one works the best. Because they really are interested in making it more available to the broader public. But it's not easy to know how to do that because the stuff they have is really expensive.
Right.
And I think the main thing about those things is not all the fancy equipment that they have. And I've done all that stuff, the hyperbaric chamber and the infrared light, all that stuff. Just because they wanted me to try it out. I don't know if that's doing all that much, but what is doing a lot is them focusing a lot of attention on your health. And when they focus a lot of attention on your health, you focus a lot of attention on your health. And people that focus a lot of attention on their health, they're healthier.
Right. Yeah. And maybe that's the takeaway. All right. So relative to our discussion today and these 2 articles, one about different ways reversing an epigenetic your biological clock, this epigenetic study here, or the tips. Kind of what's your closing thought here about the findings of these articles and discussions that they bring up that you find interesting?
Well, I think they all bring out good points and they all give good health tips. The key to it all, though, is how do you get people to do the things that they tell you, that we all know you should do. I had this really interesting experience when on one of my trips. It was to an island in the tropical Pacific where I was doing an aging study, not on the people, but on some animals that lived there. But the people there only had a life expectancy of about 55 years.
Right.
And this is a tropical island. They used to eat fish and fruit and everything. And now the most popular food on the island was Spam and turkey tails.
Okay. Really?
And you'd see people walking around with an amputated leg that you knew they probably got from diabetic, disease. And I talked to a few of them and I go, you have the most wonderful climate diet here. Traditionally, what happened? Because I just love those turkey tails. I'm sorry, I can't stay away from them. So we're battling human nature here, and we got to figure out better and better ways to do that.
All right. So, and as I realize as we're having this discussion, I have not gone to my gym for 5 or 6 days. So it's been a tough week for me, gym wise. How do you stay motivated then to do? What are the keys in terms of motivation to eat right and to exercise?
To eat right, I just think about it. My wife thinks about it, and she does most of the cooking, and I don't go to fast food places and that kind of thing. Stay motivated at the gym, for me, it has to do with sleep. If I don't physically exhaust myself, my sleep is horrible.
Right.
So one of the ways that I sleep well is that I try to physically exhaust myself every day. But of course, you can't really do that every day. You got to take an occasional day off. So yesterday, I didn't go to the gym.
Okay.
And I didn't sleep well last night. So, tonight, as soon as I'm done with my activities, I'm going to the gym, and I'm probably going to spend an hour and a half there trying to exhaust myself.
Yeah. That's all right. That's good advice from the doctor himself. All right, sir. Well, we covered some ground. Hopefully it was beneficial. Yeah.
I hope your listeners are enjoying it.
Yeah. I believe they are for sure. All right. Dr. Austad, good to see you as always. And we'll see you next time here on the Longevity Lab.